Hi, my name is Jill Reber. I'm the General Manager for Data Privacy for Logic 2020. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about operationalizing your data privacy program. And the key really is you need to develop a data-centric culture. Many companies are focusing on data privacy from a legal and security side, which is definitely foundational without understanding the actual data life cycles within and outside the company. You'll remember when GDPR passed, our inboxes were flooded with new consent requests and new privacy policies. But the business obligations and the data subject requests, they're not just something that you need to write into your privacy policy. To operationalize these regulations, you need to make sure that your business processes and your technical systems can honor the data subject rights that are granted by the regulations. For example, a consent withdrawal is not just a user interface exercise. You need to make sure that that consent withdrawal permeates through all of the systems within your company. So an understanding of the complete data lifecycle and how it proliferates both inside and outside the business with an understanding of why you have the data and how you use the data is the foundation to operationalizing your privacy program. It's that process that gives your legal folks and the rest of the organization the inputs that they need to properly document the transparency, the notice and consent requirements, and the vendor contracts. So at the time of collection, you need to keep these principles in mind: the purpose limitation, the data minimization and storage limitation, and then you revise and update your data mapping on a regular basis. Now, size of your organization is going to have an impact on your approach. It's easier to operationalize in smaller and mid-sized businesses. There are fewer data access points and simpler data flows. Larger enterprises, we've seen what I call the data privacy vision gap. So sometimes the data privacy officer has a clear vision of the data privacy readiness, which is the what, but the lines of business are left on their own to figure out the how. So that creates a lack of uniformity in how the DPO's vision of the data privacy program is operationalized across the organization. So each line of business is approaching data privacy and protection differently with regard to its own mostly siloed data sets. And these lines of businesses often have varying levels of data maturity, day-to-day processes, and data usage. So this lack of documentation and uniformity across the lines of business puts organizations at the risk of non-compliance. But even large organizations have a limited number of lines of business that take in personal data. So that's a good starting point for operationalizing your data privacy program. So you want to start with your data inventory and your system inventory, and then overlay that to create a data mapping picture of the full data lifecycle. So you start at the point of intake. So for each personal data access point, you want to do that exercise, and then you move on to your internal and external data consumers. So once each line of business has a complete picture of the full data lifecycle within its business unit, this information can be rolled into a single view so that the enterprise can monitor that the data processing activities are consistent with its guidelines. And these individual lines of business are combined, the individual lines of business pictures are then combined into a data lifecycle picture. And then that can be rolled into an executive dashboard for risk assessment, measuring a risk score for lines of business, for third parties, for requests for access to data sets, and other key measurements. Our more successful clients have established alliances between the data privacy office and legal, with the business, the data management, and the technology teams, including the engineering folks who can translate the data protection goals into how the business is actually using the personal data. And at the same time, IT leaders from information security, architecture, engineering, application development, operations, or service management areas can identify and address the technological constraints that might affect solution development and implementation. And then you have a governance committee that needs to be cross-functional, that breaks down the business silos. And ideally, you'll have a committee that comprises at least one representative from every area that handles personal information, along with the leaders from cross sections of business units and other groups that understand the specific use cases and the access requirements and how personal data flows through and outside your organization. So that's it. It's not as tough as everybody thinks.